dear students, today we are going to highlight various aspects of agrarian economy in early medieval period and the course of development. First of all, I would like to highlight or enlighten my students with regard to the significance of the early medieval period in Indian history. Why this early medieval period in Indian history is so important for us? I mean, for the readers of history. Early medieval period is a time which helped us to understand the transition from the ancient to the medieval. Secondly, it was a time when our country was going to be prepared to welcome the intrusion of another civilization which was completely unique in its nature, and it also was a time which was trying to usher a kind of cultural or a kind of religious syncretism or inclusion which also helped to change the society as well as the economy. It was a time when we must say that the economy started developing to a great extent. But we need to understand what kind of development we are talking for. Whether it was progressing towards some kind of a positive change or it was going towards some kind of a negative change or it was influenced by some kind of a negativity. Here, if I would like to quote the Marxist historians, then I must say it was a time when we can see or witness how the Asiatic mode of production was trying to dominate the economic scenario, giving emphasis on the character of the economy, which was closed. Secondly, it was a time when we have seen the lack of social mobility. The proliferation in the caste system also changed the societal structure, which had an impact on economy. The economy was basically an agrarian economy. Here we continued the legacy of the ancient India. But definitely the early medieval period was a time when we saw the Vaishyas or the merchants, they started losing their omnipotence in the society. It was a time they were not allowed to go for overseas trade. That made their position very much detrimental in the society, and they had to face a kind of social degradation. They had to follow or they had to take or adopt the profession of the agriculturists or the farmers. So here we find a change in the field of agriculture where more labor was implemented or there was no dearth of manpower. Apart from that, I would like to highlight one more feature which changed the entire economic scenario of that time. That was the presence or the existence of the land grant system. We have seen during the early medieval period the religious institutions, not only the Brahmanical religious institutions, the other religious institutions as well, like the Buddhists or the Jainas and also the others, they used to get lands from the kings. Not only that, the religious persons or the priests individually, they also started receiving land grants. Apart from that, we have also seen secular people or the organizations started getting or receiving lands or the portions of land from the kings. So it was something like a situation which indicated towards fragmentation of land and also more pressure on the peasants. And as I have already mentioned that the Vaishyas, they started losing their importance in this particular time, that also indicated their involvement to the agriculture as the labor power to a great extent. early medieval period, agrarian economy started booming. But we need to say what kind of positive changes we have seen during this period. And also, we need to emphasize on the regional variation of this agrarian economy or the development or course of this agrarian economy. It was definitely a time which was socially not that much promising, but definitely it was a time when we must see that technological advancements played a very important role for the growth of agrarian economy as well as for urbanization. So what I was trying to highlight in this particular lecture right now, that how the Brahmanas or the priests, they tried to show their expertise in this field. That means to develop agriculture or for the development of agriculture. They showed their knowledge on the seasons or on climate. That was a part of astronomy. Apart from that, we have seen various technological advancements in this particular period. The various ways of constructing canals, wells, and the ways of extracting underground water. And here also we find regional variations as well. The technologies which were being used in South India were not always the same in North India. Here I must say, in various regions we find that various technologies. What we have seen that these technological advancements made agrarian economy very much booming, and also it was a time production started growing high. And it was a time, as a result of various land grants, sub-infeudation became very much prominent or pertinent. So we find there were many landlords and the presence of the feudal system and the exploitation of the peasants. So it was a time when we can surely apply the Marxian approach of class struggle and class exploitation. Like how the peasants, they were struggling for their existence and they were being severely tortured or humiliated by the landowners, including the king. Let us discuss the regional variation of the pattern which was something favorable towards the growth of agrarian economy in early medieval period. So I would like to start with 4th and 5th centuries, where I have seen there was a spread over a good part of central India, northern Deccan and Andhra. What does it mean? In these particular areas, agriculture started taking a good shape. In 5th and 7th centuries, we have seen in eastern India, especially in Bengal and Orissa, and also in western India, in Gujarat and Rajasthan especially, the growth and development of agriculture was very much noticeable. From 7th and 8th centuries onwards, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka started witnessing good agriculture. That means good harvest. And from 9th century onwards, Kerala was a place where we have seen agriculture was very much in a satisfactory condition. And end of the 12th century was a time where we can see the entire subcontinent was flooded with agricultural blessings or with the fruits of agricultural developments excepting Punjab. So as I have already talked on technological advancements, so there is no need to explain it further, but why technological advancements are important, I would like to mention here. Technology is something which helps a society or a civilization to progress. So it was a time when we see how people, they invested or they devoted their time for technological experiments, how they made plows with iron and many devices which helped them to clear the jungle and also to harvest the soil well. It was also a time when we have seen that involvement of manpower was not only important for the growth of agriculture, animal power was also being implemented for this reason. So, in short, I must say that the entire process was very much systematic and scientific. It was not like that how the Europeans, they categorized us or they blamed us that the medieval period or the early medieval period was not a time where we witnessed changes in the field of science and technology. They also told us that medieval period was a time when we have seen darkness in the field of literature, art, culture, and that particular darkness was everywhere, and also it was an important feature of the society. Definitely we have enough rooms for discussions about this particular topic, but my argument is when we talk on early medieval period, that period was definitely a period where we have seen growth in science and technology. Whether that particular growth was being continued in the medieval period, that was a question. But we cannot say that the Indians, they were far behind or they were lagging behind in this particular sector where we are saying that technology is the backbone of progress and the Indians were not the people who enjoyed that fruits to a great extent. My point is, technological advancements were very much there in the early medieval period that helped to grow agriculture, that helped to flourish urbanization, and also that helped to give a kind of resort or relief to the people who were the merchants, because as I have already mentioned, the merchants, they were not enjoying that much favorable position in this particular period because overseas trade was banned or prohibited. So definitely for the development and growth of agrarian economy in early medieval period, technological advancements played a role of a catalyst. My academic script, I have already mentioned the names of various instruments which helped the agriculture to flourish. I hope my students will take a look to my academic script, but here I am not going to read from my academic script. Rather, I would give more emphasis on the understanding or the illustrations so that we can develop our critical thinking with this regard. As I have already mentioned about the canals, like the construction of canals was very much there, that made the supply of water very much systematic and regularized. It also controlled the frequency of flood. So it was a time when we have seen like how people, they started to take precautions to escape from the natural calamities, because we know prevention is always better than cure. So, the people in early medieval period, the agriculturists, the Brahmins, and the other sections of the society who are a part of this entire process, the Vaishyas, as they started taking the job of the agriculturists or the farmers, along with them the Sudras, or those people like whom we may say that they were the people who were not having that much greater position in the society. I'm not very sure that whether they were the untouchables or not, whether the untouchables were allowed for farming or not, but mostly the agriculturists, they were the Sudras. They played a very important role for the betterment of agriculture as well. So it was something like a reflection of their collective interests that made the backbone of agriculture very much sound and scientific. I would also like to mention not only the construction of canals was very much common during that time, but also we have seen in those areas where there was the dearth of potable or drinking water, where we find that the building of lakes or water reservoirs were also being done by the Brahmanas and also by the non-Brahmanas. These works were being considered as the job or responsibility of the royal councils as well as those people who were responsible for municipal administration. So it was a time when we have seen that the Brahmanas, they were taking part in agriculture, and it was a time when we have seen more or less some kind of a harmony existed in the field of administration which was related to agriculture. So agriculture was much more, what I can say, regularized and was much more beneficial for the people during the early medieval period, because the awareness with this particular regard increased to a great extent. As I am trying to highlight on the various ways of producing crops in early medieval period, it was a time when we witnessed commercialization of agriculture. We have seen the presence of various cash crops, along with the production of the other agricultural commodities like betel leaves, sugar cane, and also cotton. So it was a time when we have seen that agriculture started taking a shape of some kind of a commodity which would be commercialized, as well as it was also being used for personal consumption. So it was a time, especially during the first half of the early medieval period till the 8th century AD, mostly agriculture was something like a commodity which served the needs of the peasants as well as the needs of the people who were the landlords. It was not a time when the agricultural products were being exported or thought for a big scale market consumption or for a big scale trade and commerce. Rather, from 8th century onwards, agricultural products started to be more popular, or their demands grew higher, so that it was, or what I can say, so that they were being considered as the part of trade and commerce. Before that, people, whatever they were producing, they used to have all these for their own personal consumption. So the change was definitely remarkable from 8th century AD, and perhaps that change took more prominent shape in the medieval period, because in the medieval period we have seen both in international and in the domestic fields of trade and commerce, agricultural products were very much in a high demand. Now I would like to say something about the tensions in the rural society. As I have given a picture which was more or less positive about the growth of agrarian economy in early medieval period in India. I have already talked on technological advancements. I have talked on how the Brahmanas, they showed their interests for the growth and development of agriculture with their expertise in the various fields of knowledge, as I have mentioned about astronomy, through which they would like to know the climate. I have also told that it was a time when there was no dearth of labor for agriculture, as the Vaishyas, because of the situation, as they were not allowed to trade overseas, sometimes they had to take the job of the farmers or the agriculturists. It was also a time when we have seen more or less the political situation was peaceful, and both the Brahmanas and the non-Brahmanas, they worked together for constructing the canals or for the establishment of the reservoirs, the lakes and all. So the entire situation was not that much unsatisfactory, but there were certain events which took place at that time which told us about the exploitations of the local people. Like how, as a result of feudalization, the local people, that means I'm talking about the mass, definitely all were the local people. It was not the time when we have seen like the Musalmans or the people from the other countries or other places, they started dominating us. Talking about local people, especially I am trying to harp on those who were the mass, and also like who were the people who had to be tortured to a great extent by the upper class and caste of the society. So here we can apply the Marxian approach, as I have already mentioned. So here we can find in various places in the Indian subcontinent, the peasants, they revolted against the landlords as well as against the king. Here I can give the example from Bengal, from Kashmir, where the peasants, they revolted or they fought for their own rights and existence. It was also a time when we have seen the conversion of lands from Brahmadeya to the lands like which were not the lands belonged to the Brahmanas, made the situation more critical. It was a time when the Sudras, they also raised their heads and they tried to get a specific position in the society where they should also enjoy land rights. It was a time when we have seen like the Brahmanas, they were becoming targets for extortion, or Brahman Hotta was very much common at that time, which was something very much offensive in the society, but it was common as Brahmanas, they were the part of this land system, and sometimes they tortured the ordinary people or the peasants, and they also got return for their activities. So this kind of rural tensions made the situation more critical which was definitely a matter of concern, that helped us to understand the critical junctures of Indian feudalism. When we talk on feudalism, we need to remember that here we are not following the pattern or the model of European feudalism. The feudalism which originated in Europe, which had its genesis in Europe, definitely had some similarities with the feudalism which we experienced in India, especially in the early medieval period. But it was not like that in India we had completely the features of European feudalism. In India, the feudalism which we had, which was the backbone of the agrarian economy of that time, had certain specific features, which I need to highlight. So, dear students, now I would like to sum up my lecture, that what I have said, as I have mentioned about the various aspects of agrarian economy in early medieval period, where I tried to find out some critical junctures through which we could be able to assess, or we could be able to resituate or relocate the history of the same. That means the history of economy in early medieval period. And this agrarian economy, which was a very much interesting topic for the students, not only of history, for the students of social sciences, there we find how feudalism played a very important role, which perhaps changed not only the dimensions in the field of economy, also the social parameters. So it was a time when we witnessed a village economy which was closed in nature. It was a time when we have witnessed how the peasants, they were being tortured. It was a time when we have witnessed how the surplus was being extracted by the landlords with the help of various means. It was a time when we have seen the society was in a very much stratified manner, where we find the presence of the intermediaries. So these features were definitely indicating towards some kind of a system which was very much exploitative in nature. So on the one hand, we must say that the growth of agrarian economy in early medieval period was somehow satisfactory, and definitely in the second half of that particular period it also helped to grow market economy. But on the other hand, it made the situation very much turbulent for the ordinary people, for the mass, or for the people who were marginalized. We need to do further researches with this regard, especially the gender disparity in this particular area, how women were engaged in agriculture in early medieval period, whether they had any specific role in it or not. We had talked on Sudras, but we need to be more specific about the role of the untouchables, or the people who were not at all allowed to stay in the villages and who were the outcasts. So these questions definitely come into my mind, and I think like it's not only a topic for economic history, it's also a topic which is related to the social history of early medieval period, and how all these problems were related to the political tensions of that time. When the Muslim rulers, they started ruling us, how did they try to change this existing pattern of agriculture, which was apparently something satisfactory or seemed to be satisfactory, but definitely had many problems, as what we have already discussed. So how the Muslim rulers, they tried to cope up with this particular situation, whether they followed the legacy of the early medieval period or they introduced the components which they had brought from their own motherland, definitely an important topic for discussion which might help our students to understand better the critical junctures of the agrarian economy in early medieval period and its course of development.